Welcome to Trinity Radio. I'm Braxton Hunter, and along with me is
Jonathan Pritchett.
And today we are doing an old-fashioned response video to some atheists who talked about whether or not atheists all believe the same things. We're going to jump right into that in a second, but let me just say something first, Pritchett, about the fact that when we talk about worldview and atheism, we're often told that atheism is not a worldview. It's just a position on one issue. And that, that's fine and everything. I get what you're saying. However, we've done videos on this channel before, one in particular called Is Atheism a Worldview, in which we tried to show that, okay, that's fine. And yes, atheism is not monolithic. That's right. But when you extract theism from a worldview, even if you want to say, well, we don't put anything in its place. It's not like we have now a belief that God doesn't exist because we are a lack of belief. We believe atheism is a lack of belief. All right, fine. When you take God out of a worldview, then that world, certain things tend to change in that worldview because in your web of beliefs, when you change something, it makes a difference. But according to Pew Research, among atheists in the United States, it might be helpful for you to know that whether you consider it a worldview or not, there is some solidarity on some very important issues in our world today. For example, 69% of atheists are, what do you think, Democrat or Republican? What do you think, Pritchett?
Probably Democrat.
Absolutely 69%. But hey, there's a fair number there, that is not Democrat or doesn't know. Okay. Abortion. Should abortion be legal in all or most cases, Pritchett? What do you think? Do you think they overwhelmingly...
Probably all pro-choice.
87% say abortion should be legal in all or most cases. Same-sex marriage, are they for or against it?
For it.
They're for same-sex marriage, 92%. This I find interesting. Evolution, what do you think?
What percentage?
Sure.
96%?
It's 91%. And what I think is funny about that is that is one less percentage point than believe in same-sex marriage.
Ah.
So they're more united on same-sex marriage than they are on evolution. So anyway, I bring all this up to say that whether you want to say it's a worldview or not, when you extract theism from a worldview, everyone has a worldview, even if they're not aware of what their worldview is. But when you extract theism, certain things begin to move around and change, and we start to see kind of at least in terms of an atheist materialist sort of situation, unity on some of the biggest social questions and science questions that we are dealing with today in political issues. So I think that there's more. I think that whether you want to say there is the atheist worldview, there's not even necessarily the Christian worldview. There are Christian worldviews. There are atheist worldviews. There are worldviews that are Christian. We don't have exactly the same worldview. We differ on minor things, you and I.
Yeah, I would say that, if you're a determinist, like a theistic determinist, like a Calvinist, you have a fundamentally different worldview.
It's a very different worldview.
Yeah.
It's
how
it plays out.
Yeah.
And so anyway, there are strong similarities, so let's not go overboard with that. But let's take a look, because actually there are some differences as we see in this video. Pritchett, anything you want to say before we jump right in?
I'm shooting from the hip here. I have not seen the video yet. And
that's a good point. I normally don't shoot from the hip. I did play the video through once, but that's it. And this is kind of off the top of my head too, which I actually don't think people should do. I don't, I think you should have something to say when you're going to do something. But
I'm still brimming with joy that you even invited me to do a non-live stream video. So
you're the eye candy, Pritchett. Yeah, and here we go. Let's check out now. They got, so here's the setup. They got six atheists. They got a number of atheists together. And they're in a room, and there are lines in that room. They start out in the middle line, and depending on the question, they can move to other lines, which, depending on the direction they go, are strongly agree or strongly disagree. Mm-hmm. So you'll have to pay attention to that. But here we go.
I am open to some supernatural and spiritual ideas. 3, 2, 1.
We've probably all had the experience of some older person saying, oh, well, when you're on your deathbed, I'm sure you'll believe, you'll want Jesus or something. And no, like I'm happy, I'm content, I'm excited about my beliefs.
Okay, real quick, Pritchett, I just want to say about this, and I'm sure you're probably thinking the same thing, which is, how do you know? How does this guy know what he's going to be thinking on his deathbed? Right? On his deathbed, it is the point that the person wants to bring is perhaps on your deathbed, when you know you're about to die, you might have different thoughts about these issues, and it might concern you enough that perhaps you want to, reach out to God. And that's a thing you don't know until you're there, I think.
Well, but some people will preemptive that. Like I can think of Christopher Hitchens. He preempted that by saying, if something happens where I'm screaming out to God or Jesus or whatever, just know that my brain is so far gone with the cancer that that's not me. And so there are people that want to preempt that possible deathbed conversion early. The problem with that is, if something like that was to even occur with Christopher Hitchens, or how do you know?
We would never know.
Why would we think that because you said something earlier that you weren't in your right mind when you said that? Right. Because you literally had a change. Like, we don't know, same thing, but let's be fair. Same thing could be with Christians. You might get to your deathbed and see no light at some fictive tunnel that you were told that, people with near-death experiences had or something like that, and you see nothing. Doubtful that any Christian is going to have a change of heart, but I mean, right. You never know. So maybe you can predict it. Maybe you can predict what you're going to be thinking at that point. But you never do know what you're going to think. You never know. I don't hear much deathbed deconstructions, you know what I mean? So we don't ever really hear about that. But we do hear a number of deathbed conversions.
Sure.
So I think if we just weighed those out, it would seem to me that it would favor the idea that, if anything, you don't know what you're going to be thinking at that. He doesn't even know. He could convert to Christianity a year from the film.
Right. And
video
what he says here is, no, like when someone says, well, you might convert on your deathbed, he says, no, I'm content with my beliefs. I'm happy with my beliefs. Okay.
Well, they said he's excited about it. That's okay. Interesting.
Well, these worldview issues aren't necessarily about what makes you the most happy, or whether you right now feel content and right now feel happy and right now feel excited. We're talking about how you're going to feel decades from now when you are on your deathbed.
Supposing he lives that long. But It's interesting that he said, I'm excited about my beliefs, because of all the YouTubers that we've watched, the YouTube atheists, I don't think I've ever recalled any of them saying anything in that way. And in fact, there's a long tradition of atheists that say, it's miserable. It's not pleasant to think the way that we, know.
I'm excited about my atheism.
I'm super excited about my belief. No, I'm not saying that no one's ever said it, but we don't really experience those kinds of comments. So I found that it
could be that what you're really excited about. You're excited that you came to these beliefs on your own and it's not what your parents believe.
Yeah.
It could be that you're kind of proud that you were able to take that step and make a change like that, that you're passionate now about telling believers why they're wrong, which we're going to find out about this guy in just a moment. He's a part of an atheist community.
Well, and I think that excites them, the debate, the arguing. Yeah. And that excites a lot of Christians too.
Yeah. But notice that this isn't so much about your beliefs exciting you as what you're going to do with those beliefs.
Right.
And a lot of those things you could have done as a Christian, assuming this guy ever was claiming to be a Christian, but you could do things with your beliefs as a Christian that are exciting too. Yeah. We're doing it right now. And guess what? We are very much excited about our beliefs. All right. You ready to go on?
Yeah.
I'm open to ideas that can fit within a reasonable framework, but no spiritual or supernatural idea has ever fit that standard.
Okay, now this is
that standard or his standard?
Well, the standard of fitting within a reasonable worldview. What I want to say about this is this is an example of the difference that we see among, and I don't mean any disrespect to this guy, because he may well see this video because he runs some kind of an atheist group or something. But the thing about it is, and I say this respectfully, all these people seem very nice, and I appreciate that. But the thing about this is, here we've got a guy who has an idea. This is the difference between new atheism and the more philosophically, academically rigorous atheism, because you'll, like, if you go back and read, I've mentioned this many times, if you go back and read the evidential argument from evil and some varieties of atheism by William Rowe, what you're going to find out is in the last few paragraphs of that article, that famous article, he talks about how to be a friendly atheist is to be someone who recognizes you could be a jerk and be an atheist, but you're a friendly atheist for Rowe if you are willing to say that people who believe have justifiable warrant for believing in God. Yeah. And so I just want to point out that the way you're hearing people talk right now here is great because it's what we're hearing is real people.
Right.
Right. But at the same time,
it's bumper sticker atheist. It's a throwaway line. There's nothing reasonable about this spirituality stuff. Yeah. And now, again, to be fair, I can understand when somebody who's an atheist that doesn't really know philosophy, is not that sophisticated with the ideas. They could honestly say, yeah, that's not reasonable. Whereas the friendly atheists, as Rowe describes them, a little bit more sophisticated, and they could say, yeah, I mean, it's reasonable, but I'm not convinced, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I understand how you got there. This guy's like the throwaway line. It just doesn't fit in with the reasonable thing. But there's a significant difference here that I think that even the unfriendly atheists would have to acknowledge. Okay, I can understand if you think certain Christian doctrines are just bad or wrong or whatever. But I think that Christian apologists, the more effective ones, have demonstrated that the logical conclusion of an atheist worldview, someone like, his name is escaping me, Rosenberg, mm-hmm. Someone like that,
Alex
Rosenberg, you can demonstrate, and I think William Lane Craig did this exceptionally well in his debate, that no, atheism leads to absolute absurdity, and that's not. These are the consequences of atheism. It's absolutely absurd. Now, you may think in a colloquial sense that, the Son of God, who's also God, dying on a cross, whatever, that's absurd. To forgive him for that. You can think that an idea is absurd, but that's not really absurd. You just don't.
It sounds weird to you.
It sounds weird. That's not an actual absurdity.
And guess what? Look at the current theories about quantum mechanics. There's weird stuff.
Yeah.
It's like every time an atheist says to me anything about talking snakes and talking donkeys in the Bible, I'm like, first of all, you don't think the creator of the universe has the power to do something like that? And of course, this serpent, you don't think a supernatural being has the power to do something. But if you think that's weird, that's saying it's weird is not a criticism, or else quantum mechanics would just throw it all out because
because it's weird, but it's not absurd.
Right.
But whereas you can demonstrate that the logical conclusion of atheism, which I think entails metaphysical naturalism and all these other things that these people don't. I mean, some of these atheists in this very question are not going to go there because they're open or somewhat open, which I find it matches the research that we've seen from Pew and others. But atheism actually leads to absurdities. And so if you have a worldview that can logically conclude a bunch of things that are absolutely absurd, what you can't say is that the other view is not reasonable.
Right.
Because your view actually dismisses reason altogether at the end of the line.
Another thing is, this guy, we don't want to analyze too much, I guess, but this guy has said, well, if it fits within reason, at least reasonable, paradigm or whatever. The thing about it is, how does the supernatural not fit within a reasonable paradigm? What thing? This is the cumulative case sort of approach is. I can lay you out a number of things, as we know, that I think make better sense on a theistic narrative than they make on an atheistic narrative, and I'm happy to talk about those. But not that you don't have answers, but then I want to see you give me the things that you think fit well about things that you and I both agree about this world, about the world we live in, and tell me what of those does Christianity have a hard time answering, or theism have a hard time answering? Because I'm not actually seeing it. You're saying it doesn't fit. Even on your view, it doesn't fit, unless on your view you just have this fine print that says anything supernatural, anything that has to do with God, that's not reasonable. We're excluding that from the beginning, like you're the Jesus seminar or something.
Yeah.
This is basically what we have with this guy is a presuppositional atheism.
Yes.
I'm presupposing that a reasonable worldview doesn't have those things.
Yes.
So there you go. It doesn't have those
and
things.
being blind to the fact that, if the logical conclusion of atheism is true, then you don't exist. Your words don't make any sense. Nothing's even remotely good, even in a relative sense.
Some of that taken from Alex Rosenberg, in case anyone, from a book called A Handbook for Atheism.
Yes.
If that's atheism,
and like William Lane Craig, I agree that you're right. If atheism is true, that's your bucket.
And if Rosenberg is right that that's what A Handbook for Atheism should include, then you should get off the train immediately.
Now,
because that's the end of reason.
Now, these people who strongly agree or somewhat open or whatever on the other end,
we're going to hear from them.
While I don't think that atheism is a well, atheism's fine, I guess, because you don't believe that a god or gods exist. But if you're going to be open to a supernatural, I want an explanation for your paganism, what grounds those elements of reality.
Oh, I'm so glad that you have brought that up. Let's continue the video and you'll see why.
Okay.
I'm open to, that's why I'm in that weird category of agnostic atheism. Like a lot of people are like, what's that? How can you be an agnostic and an atheist? That's weird.
By the way, for anybody that doesn't know, this is partly a result of the lack theism. Chris Date, professor here at Trinity, actually did a video on his theoapologetics. I linked it in the community tab on our YouTube channel, where he talks about the lack theism thing. But the reason for this is atheism has been defined in academia as a proposition that there is no God. I'm taking the position there's no God. Lack theism is saying, no, we're not saying there is no God. We're not saying there is a God. We're saying I don't believe in God. You say, well, that's to say there's no God. No, not necessarily. They're saying that you can say, well, I don't believe in God, but it doesn't mean I believe that God doesn't exist. So what they want to say is that discussion is about your beliefs, but there's another discussion about knowledge.
Right.
And I can be an agnostic because I can say, I don't know. But then if you ask me about my beliefs, I can say, well, I don't have a belief in God.
Right.
Right. So I'm an agnostic atheist, which you got to understand that knowledge is a subset of belief. Otherwise, you get into weird discussions like I had on Twitter not too long ago with a guy who says, no, I said, do you believe in evolution? He says, no, I don't. I know that evolution is true. And I'm like, great. The headline for this discussion is this guy doesn't believe in evolution. Right. And he's like, well, no, it's not that.
Right.
Well, that's what it is.
Right. So yeah, what is knowledge? Is a justified true belief.
Probably plus whatever something else.
Right. So your belief corresponds to reality. So I think between Chris Date's most recent video and another professor, Russell Crawford, several years ago, I think we have it on our channel, where I think between those two videos, lack theism needs to go away, or make that your thing. Just say you're a lack theist because you want to talk about your autobiography and psychological states, and you don't really want to participate in any sort of worldview discussion where you have no contributions whatsoever to make.
Let's keep trucking now because we've gotten through 1.5 guys and we're 18 minutes in.
Yeah, okay.
You're contradicting yourself. But I'm open to it. I don't believe in the Bible God because he's an a-hole. But I believe that...
Why doesn't he believe in the Bible God?
He does not believe in the Bible God because he's an a-hole.
That's his reason. I don't like the Bible God.
Right.
That's it. Now, he could, as some have, roll that into some sort of an argument from evil with a target on Yahweh in the Old Testament, perhaps. But that's not what we got from him. What we got from him is, I don't believe in him because I think he's an a-hole, to use his term. And that's not a good reason not to believe in something, is because you don't like it.
I think Cthulhu is an a-hole, but if Cthulhu exists, it doesn't matter that I think he's an a-hole.
And we're just using the terminology this guy's using.
Right. So I'm just saying, I don't like Cthulhu, but if that's the god of the cosmos, doesn't matter that I don't like him.
The fact of something doesn't change because of my personal feelings about it. Yeah.
In the universe somewhere, even though there's a lot of evidence that there's nothing out there, there could be another dimension. There could be like black holes, like Interstellar could go somewhere.
Right, yeah.
We don't know.
For me,
Okay, so that's the typical, there's so much we don't know that how could we ever say that? So I'm an agnostic atheist. And it's like, okay, but if the evidence we currently have in the debate between Mike Licona and Matt Dillahunty from 2017, this is the thing that everybody, this is one of the things that Mike Licona brought out that people didn't like. But if the best evidence we have right now seems to demonstrate that this thing is impossible on naturalism, some particular thing, like this is like the ocean parting in Jesus' name, right? If this is impossible, our best evidence is it's impossible on naturalism, then we're justified in thinking something supernatural happened. And I think that's a fair point. But this is what we call a naturalism of the gaps. Well, we don't have an answer for some stuff, but one day we're going to figure all that out, and it won't be anything supernatural.
Yeah, but they'll also follow that up with, to be fair. Look at me being fair.
Be fair, man.
Well, look at me. Why am I doing this? Well, to follow it up is there were previous things thought to have been having supernatural causes, and as time has gone on, we have discovered the natural causes for these things. So given enough time, we will also have natural explanations for the phenomena that we can't currently account for.
Or it's likely that we will.
It's likely that we will, and because of my prior beliefs of it's more likely than my reasons for not believing any sort of supernatural entity behind it, I'm just going to stick with this and the trajectory of.
So we're really steel manning everyone we've been talking to so far, because we're saying, well, they could have said this, but it is true that they could form an inductive argument for this by arguing that way. That's something that could be done, but he didn't do that.
Which is totally irrelevant to anything.
But it's also not. Oh, but hold on a second, because that is fine for you to do that. But you have to support your premises, and that argument will have premises that talk about the things in the past that we have figured out that weren't supernatural, that we thought were supernatural.
I was going to say what I've said.
Yeah, go ahead.
Previous episodes. My whole argument, for supernatural causes behind miracles is irrelevant to the fact that if a natural explanation for the occurrence it does not account for the timing or the purpose or the intent or the telos that was behind that particular thing. So if we figure out how to revive corpses or whatever, we figure out what mechanism God used to part the Red Sea or to raise Jesus from the dead or to do whatever, irrelevant of the fact that it occurred when it occurred in the religious, highly charged context that it occurred and so on and so forth, just like the ground opening up and swallowing the people at core. Tectonic plate shifting and all that doesn't matter.
You're just explaining how God did this incredible thing at exactly the right time.
Right. So it gains nothing to use that argument of trajectory that we found.
But two, there are a lot of things that that science has tried to explain, and it's ended up looking better and better for theism, like design arguments for one thing, consciousness, endeavors into consciousness,
beginning of the cosmos,
the cosmology. These things haven't changed anything, and this notion that it's just God throwing lightning bolts and stuff. In the 2,000-year history of the church, I'm not sure how many people believed that lightning was God throwing lightning bolts, right?
There's some incidents where fire came down from heaven and destroyed city gates.
Well, see, that would go back to your thing of, okay, here's a thing that happened in a religiously charged context in exactly the right time in a theater, where religiously informed theater, and so that's how we know that was an act.
Yeah, you're just giving me hows instead of
Yeah. All right, let's keep.
Which is why Richard Dawkins doesn't want to deal with whys, because I always believe there's a why. I don't believe that Christians should say more than they do when certain natural disasters hit certain cities or whatever. Don't say more than you know, because you don't know.
Yeah.
But I also, in their defense, God knows, and maybe there's possible explanations.
It could be, but it's like even if you're an atheist out there, hear us when we say, like, when some famous preacher comes up and says, when that tornado went through that city and killed all those people, that's God judging America for abortion or something.
Right. Or when that lightning bolt
hit, a weird
hit
place to judge it.
John Piper said when that lightning bolt hit that Evangelical Lutheran Church or whatever,
that was God.
When they were deliberating, gay clergy and all that, it's like, no, that was God giving them a reminder. Well, I mean, you don't
Here's the thing. If we grant you, like, say I'm an atheist, I'm talking to John Piper. Piper, if I grant you everything you believe about the world, and I grant you everything you believe about Revelation, like not the book of Revelation, but theological revelation, God revealing things. If I grant you everything, you still can't know that.
Right.
You're just saying it.
And unlike the prophets who announced beforehand, you didn't.
And that's what I call the grandma fallacy, because, again, if you're jumping rope and your grandma tells you to come eat dinner and you don't, you keep jumping rope. Come eat dinner, you better listen to your grandma, and you keep jumping rope. When you fall and bust your face, your grandma pops the door open and says, God did that because you didn't listen to your grandma. Well, it's fallacious. It may well be, but my grandma doesn't know. Right? Okay, let's keep trucking.
I'm open to Wiccanism and paganism, It's a fun little thing to do, see what happens.
I think you can be.
She's open to Wiccanism and paganism.
Right.
Interesting. This is why I said you're going to be glad you said that, because this is very interesting, because I have noticed, and the people that want to decry this, maybe it's not you, but it sure is a whole lot of other people. And if you're a Wiccan or a pagan watching this and it doesn't feel this way to you, walk a mile in the Christian shoes with this sort of thing. Not that you don't have your own issues that you have to deal with, but the fact is, pagans and Wiccans, because most of the ones I've encountered have been leftist, like liberal leaning on social issues and things like that. The atheists don't care. They think it's actually kind of fascinating. Yeah. Why? Because that's a lot of what this is really about, is political stuff. And, what do they always say? Well, to the extent that you don't hurt anybody, and they think that we're hurting people when we talk about biblical sexuality, the things that we have to say about these sorts of things. Can I tell you, I get, and maybe I'm preempting because I think the guy says this later, brings this out, and I was going to say it then, but you atheists out there who are watching, who may, and I understand from your worldview why you see this the way you do. I do. And I live in the same world with you. I say this all the time. We watch the same movies, hear the same music. We understand. We get it. We know how it sounds. But if you want to make it sound like we are these wicked, bigoted, backwater people because of our views on biblical sexuality, and I'm saying that generically because there's so much in our culture today, you just have to say biblical sexuality. But guess what? We actually see people who are pro-abortion or pro-choice, which is 87% of atheists in America who responded to the poll. That is pretty darn bad from our perspective.
Yeah, you like to kill.
So you want to
chop
say
up little babies in the womb.
So you want to say it's so bad. Barbaric. Our views about biblical sexuality. This is not a tu quo qui, because we're happy to respond to those. But we've done a lot of work on this channel with respect to abortion because we think that's pretty darn bad. Yeah. So. The idea is that you can paint someone a certain way.
But as far as she's concerned, what I want to know is...
What do you want to know?
What I want to know is how come my Christian worldview can ground the phenomenon that Wiccans and other pagans experience in the world, and I don't have to discount it or be skeptical off, because I have a worldview, a supernatural worldview, grounded in God, grounded in God's creation of fallen angels and all of that other stuff, and in a Bible where there were sorcerers casting spells and all sorts of stuff that the Bible didn't add comment that, oh, by the way, this is fake, like Moses' showdown with Pharaoh's sorcerers, in the throne room. Why can I still account for your worldview better than the stuff that you...
Better than you can.
Yeah. Just spew off the top of your head that gives that this irrational has no meaning to it.
All right.
Where does this come? I mean, at least panpsychism comes up with at least a natural explanation for consciousness that is just kind of embedded in every physical object or whatever. But
yeah, that's even so strange to me.
Yeah, even that's still at least a better attempt.
Yeah.
Than, okay, why do your spells work if you believe they work?
Yeah.
What grounds that in reality that makes that possible? What forces? Right. What impersonal forces about the cosmos makes that, and how is it that you can tap into it, and by what means?
But she seems like a nice person.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
All of them do.
I can explain her worldview better.
Absolutely. This is why, as we mentioned this just recently somewhere, that C.S. Lewis was saying in that Christmas article that was uncovered around 2012 that a pagan at least has some of the fundamentals. They don't deny a supernatural worldview or things like that. So all right, let's keep trucking.
Yes, and spiritual too. You can have different beliefs. I've had some crazy Ouija board experiences. I believe in something else. I don't believe in someone else.
Hold on. We're going to go to the full screen camera because we got something to say about this. All right, so this very nice person has just said, I'm open because I've had some crazy experiences with Ouija boards.
I don't doubt it.
But I don't believe I believe there might be something, I don't know what she said, but she said not personal.
No, I believe...
Not someone. I believe in something, not someone.
Something, not
okay, that's to say it's not personal.
Right.
But what kind of information, what sort of supernatural event takes place with a Ouija board, but that it's actually conveying language to you?
Yeah.
which requires a mind to be on the other end. In fact, you know this because you're asking.
Well, they believe that it's a mind.
You're asking a mind
Yeah.
to communicate with you. So how can you say it's because of that? I'm open, but I don't think it's a something, not a someone.
Yeah, I mean,
Excuse
this is
me?
of course, a practice banned in the Bible. You know, I mean,
Right, divination.
But I, you know,
Interesting. Go watch the latest Genesis series episode because you remember when the brothers of Joseph come to Joseph and he sends them back and he puts their money back in their sacks to trick them and all that. And then when they come back with Benjamin, he puts a silver cup in Benjamin's sack, and it's specifically mentioned that this is a divination cup.
Yeah.
And then Joseph actually says to his brothers before they know it's him. He says, "Do you not know who I am and that I can practice divination?" Okay, so did Joseph practice divination? Check out the Genesis series to find out.
Right.
Go on.
Yeah, and so it's a something, and that's as far as it goes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I can give you a full account of Christianity that can explain all that, because one thing that you can find is the atheists like her or whatever. You can get a room of Christians and atheists together in the same room, and the one thing that you will find that some of them will agree on is that there are some Christians and some atheists who have had weird experiences with a Ouija board.
Yeah, and guess what? Our worldview, like you were saying before, would account for not just something weird happening, but an entity that can communicate to you, right? So, all right, let's go back and keep trucking. Yep.
I believe as above, so below. I think everything is very connected, and I believe that I should behave in a way that I would want acted towards back to me. And I think that's a very spiritual idea, you know, that the energy is recycled and that our actions invite actions.
Praying is a waste of time. 3, 2, 1, go.
Praying is a waste of time.
Okay. So most of them are agreeing.
People argue very.
Two somewhat disagree that prayer is a waste of time. And of course we know that many atheists will say, well, there's some natural good in self-reflecting and being tranquil and all that sort of thing.
But prayer is specifically a communication. It is not a meditation.
Right.
Prayer is communication with the divine. And I don't know what they think prayer is to know why they're... I understand I don't understand why no one strongly disagreed with that. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
It was all agree or back towards the other.
Yeah.
There was somewhat disagree. No one said strongly agree or strongly disagree.
Yeah.
They're just kind of
We didn't think about this.
But these are real atheists, though. These are not
Everyday
YouTube atheists.
Except for this guy. I don't know that he's a YouTube atheist, but he's going to say in a minute that he runs a community for atheists.
Okay.
Often to me that prayer brings a lot of comfort and has meaning to them. You know, why it has to be that over all of the other options you can do, I don't know. And when considering that in a lot of cases you're choosing to step back, you're choosing to remove your responsibility from any situation. Yeah, I have issues with that.
Nothing aggravates me more, too, especially in like our current political climate.
You have something to say about that?
But he doesn't know what he's just trying to. The fact that you said he leads an atheist community, you can kind of tell he's trying to sound thoughtful about all of his answers or whatever. So I don't know how honest it is, but I know that it's honest enough to where he couldn't move himself all the way to strongly agree. Now, the girl who's talking right now, she was in the somewhat disagree line, right? So play her for a second. I want to see. I want to hear more from her.
When a group of people is gunned down and a Republican politician tweets out sending thoughts and prayers, but at the same time, I'm on the somewhat disagree side because I personally think praying will not accomplish anything. Yeah. But I think that what someone has to do to put positive energy out into their life and start their day, and I know that my parents pray for me every night, and it makes me happy that I think like they're sending out positive thoughts.
Okay, now did she say she was upset when politicians say thoughts and prayers?
Not necessarily.
I think
mean,
she did. Hold up. Let's go back here.
I mean, it was more of
thoughts and prayers.
Choosing to remove your responsibility from any situation. Yeah, I have issues with that.
Nothing aggravates me more, too, especially in like our current political climate, when a group of people is gunned down and a Republican politician tweets out sending thoughts and prayers. But at the same time, I'm on the.
But at the same time, she says, when my mother and father say it, I'm happy.
Right.
First of all, what's wrong with a politician saying thoughts and prayers?
Yeah. Why is a politician fundamentally different than your mother? Which, I mean, you know, but she didn't specify which kind of politicians. She
said Republicans.
Oh, she did say Republicans. Oh.
But it's not as though we can't find Democrats who said thoughts and prayers.
Oh,
I'm sure.
Okay, so she's saying something she doesn't mean then. Because if it's Republican, you know what, Democrats, except for Barack Obama, who said thoughts and prayers are not enough, was what he said about that after a school shooting. But other Democrats have said, you know, send your thoughts and prayers or whatever. But she doesn't fundamentally have a problem with that idea, because when people give her thoughts and prayers, well, she views it as sending positivity out into the cosmos.
See, now, and what does that mean?
Right. It means absolutely nothing, because
when my parents do this for me, they're sending positivity out into the universe or whatever she said.
Right.
What does that mean if you're an atheist? Now she
thinks
has not identified as an atheist naturalist, but she's an atheist. So what? Even like you believe you're a spiritual person or whatever. Right. What does that mean?
Well, she doesn't believe anyone's
to
talking
send out positive thoughts.
Yeah. She's the one that the something, not a someone. So she doesn't think that the prayers are going to anyone, but she does think that,
or she might think
that there is some sort of benefit that she receives herself, because it makes her feel
immaterially
good, that there's a sentiment being expressed behind thoughts and prayers, that even if she doesn't believe it has any purchase whatsoever, and she doesn't like it when Republicans do it, but for some reason Democrats get a pass, it's a nice sentiment, and she's not against the nice sentiment.
That's what you take her to mean?
Yeah.
Okay, well, it sounded a little bit more mystical with the positive energy going out. But if that's what she means, and I could see that, then that's not so crazy. I mean, from her perspective. All right, let's go.
I grew up religious. 3, 2, 1.
What do you think is going to happen here?
I think Mr. Atheist Cheerleader is going to go up to the agree or strongly agree. I'm head of the atheist chapter or whatever.
Well, I think you'll be interested in how this shakes out.
Really?
I was born into Catholicism. I was born into...
Okay, so am I right that everyone in the room moved to I was raised religious? To some degree or other?
Somewhat agree, or strongly agree.
Like family. I think the majority of religion is indoctrination of children. It's just by happenstance of where you're born, what religion you're born into, and who your parents happen to be.
I grew up in a very quintessential Jewish.
Okay, hold up. She's about to tell us that she grew up in a Jewish home, but he what was his thing? His thing
wherever
was
you're born.
Of religion is indoctrination of children. It's just by happenstance of where you're born.
You know, you're born there and you're indoctrinated. That's all that's going on. Well, first of all, we've talked about this indoctrination issue before. Indoctrination is the worst imaginable way. Indoctrination comes with the morphological meaning, whatever it etymologically meant, of teaching people things that can't be questioned. And that's not what strong Christians do. Is not to say that there haven't been parents do that, not to say there haven't been pastors do that, or other religious leaders, but that's not the... We are fine with question. My kids ask me, why do we believe that?
Right.
You answer it. Does that qualify as indoctrination? Because here's the thing. If they just mean you teaching your kids that this is true, if you're a parent and you're not a horrible one, like abusing your kids or something, or ignoring them, your kids think you're awesome. They love you. And here's the thing. You're just by them knowing that you hold to a particular thing. It's like we were listening to an atheist blogger or whatever saying, my kids, I don't push this on them. I just go in my room and I do my blogging or whatever and stuff, or YouTube videos. You don't think your kids know what you're doing? And you don't think they're going to want to be like their mom and dad?
Yeah.
Does that count as indoctrination now? because it was implicit or indirect.
Yeah, YouTube atheists with kids, are they not indoctrinating the kids with the worldview that they have?
Exactly.
Right.
Well, we teach critical thinking, they say, and not. Well, actually, next Thursday I'll be beginning, because I homeschool one of my kids. Me and my wife does. She does most of it. But I plan to actually literally teach critical thinking to one of my daughters. I wonder how many people that say that actually take an hour.
No, they don't. They're the mother and raised by wolves, and don't you dare pray. You know what I mean? Don't you pray. You're not going to church with your friend. I bet you that's a lot of them. They won't admit that, but that's a lot of them.
All right, here we go.
Don't you pray.
Religion you're born into and who your parents happen to be.
I grew up in a very quintessential Jewish household, but I did go on birthright when I was 18. And I think that was a big factor in my atheism, because while I was on that trip, I asked a lot of questions, which I think you're supposed to do to get out of it. And all I could think about was how if I was a couple miles over, I might be praying to Allah instead of Hashem. I couldn't find a difference in my God versus another God, or justification for why my God was more likely of existing than another God.
For me, growing
So you decided that none of them.
Right, which doesn't follow.
First of all, that doesn't follow. And secondly, I can give her something that shows her that the Jewish God is more likely than any other God. Mm-hmm. First of all, there is like the greatest fulfillment of prophecy that has ever happened. Guess what? Made by the Jewish God. Made by the Jewish
biblical
God.
Jewish God. Yeah, not rabbinic Judaism.
Right. We're talking about, and we're talking about God doing something to change the world in an incredible way by sending his son to die on the cross and rise again.
Right. And just because if you might have been born several miles over, you'd be born in a Muslim family. And just like the guy before her said, it's all about what home you grew up in and what they taught you or whatever. None of that is relevant to what's true.
Right. That's, where you were born. It's like we said with the Easter eggs. And someone brought up a good point. It could be that none of the Easter eggs have anything in them. Right. But it still remains that, running on the assumption that one of these eggs might have something in it, if I'm standing next to one and there's 100 eggs out there, Easter eggs, that are all empty, I'm standing next to one and I pick it up and I shake it and it sounds like there's something in there, I wouldn't say, well, it can't be this one, even though I have a reason to believe it, because it's the one right next to me. Yeah. And that doesn't work. I was kind of started out in it, Yeah. So anyway.
Mormon, it was just really oppressive. It was basically your life and your whole
She's Mormon.
Identity, and everyone that you even had to just hang out with or just be around was Mormon. You don't have a choice, basically. It's been a struggle for me. I left when I was 18 years old. I wouldn't have it any other way, honestly, because I do not like to believe in a lie. Mormonism
Well, let's let her finish.
is a lie and it's a fraud.
Amen. And
I
on
agree.
top of that, I believe her. The way she said that just seemed like this is really sincere. LDS, Latter-day Saints, we're supposed to call them now instead of Mormon, right? Or at least they're supposed to identify as Latter-day Saints. When I was in California just the other day, Jonathan, I was walking along towards the lighthouse with this guy and his wife and her friend. And Sarah kind of hang back and talked to them. And I started talking to this guy, and he brought up he went somewhere for church. And I said, oh, where do you go to church? And he said, well, we're Latter-day Saints. And he said, they want us to say Latter-day Saints now because Mormon is thought of as a cult or something. And it's like these people don't even think that we're Christians. So we want to point out the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, well,
yeah,
that's because you're not a Christian.
Yeah.
You're
a Mormon.
You're a Mormon. You're a Latter-day, whatever you want to call yourself. The picture of Jesus that is given to us in Mormonism is heretical and is not orthodoxy. On top of that, you've got logical problems with Mormonism that we won't get into. But simply put, if you understand the difficulty or some of the arguments for causal finitism and the impossibility of a past infinite universe, well, you can apply that to Mormonism when it comes to the Father, God the Father. See, for them, the Father is one in a chain of fathers. There was another Father before him and before him and before him. And if you listen to the chairpersons for the church, there was no first Father, which means you have a literally past infinite chain of fathers Stuff like this, and of course the Book of Abraham fiasco. Go watch the video I did in response to the Mormon guy Kwaku. I hope I'm saying his name right. We go over it there. But this is just one of the most obviously false religions in the world today. And if you're in it, I hurt for you. But do not believe that what is being said by your leadership in Mormon about God, about Jesus, about the Bible is true. It is not true. And when you leave Mormonism, which I hope you do, it doesn't mean, oh, I guess I go to atheism now. It means maybe the Mormons poisoned the message of Christianity.
Yeah. You go to the faith that the Mormons corrupted. That's what
Amen. Amen.
Yeah, I think we're very close on like the same spectrum. But I grew up born and raised as a Jehovah's Witness, believing that Jehovah was God, believing that Armageddon was going to come, and if you weren't a Jehovah's Witness and we didn't convert everyone else to Jehovah's Witnesses, they were going to die. You believe this way: no holidays, no birthdays, no Christmas, no blood transfusions. Like,
first of all, he's Jehovah's Witness, so my heart goes out to him too for the same reasons. Because Jehovah's Witness is also
corrupted Christianity,
a corruption of Christianity. It's a cult of Christianity. But
and he recognized that we're in the same boat.
Yeah.
Good job, Christians. We've got them convinced.
Yeah, right. But you might wonder sometimes, like, why do they do that thing about birthdays and all these other things? One of the reasons is because, and this is the kind of thing you'll learn if you take the cults class at Trinity College of the Bible and Theological Seminary, but cults often will find things that they think they can back up with Scripture that are different from everybody else, so that they can define their what their faith is as being different and having different markers than other faiths. He says, yeah, if we got to tell everybody and convert everybody before Armageddon happens. But I have talked to Jehovah's Witnesses on occasion at my house, and on one occasion I asked a Jehovah's Witness fellow, "What when that happens, what happens to me? Am I in trouble? What's going to happen?" And he said, "Well, no. I mean, you'll have an opportunity then to trust in the one true God." Like, oh, great. Then we can Pascal's wager this thing, because on my worldview, you do not get a second chance necessarily. And so, I'm safe for believing what I believe. But of course, there's a lot of other great reasons.
But if you're right, then I'm still safe.
If you're right, I still get a second chance.
Right.
If I'm right and you're wrong, you don't get a second chance.
So, yeah, that's one of those where Pascal's wager is perfectly fine.
Right. And he said, I have to leave now. You're disturbing my faith.
Yeah, I bet.
I'll never forget 22-year-old Braxton Hunter talking in McMinnville, Tennessee to a Jehovah's Witness. All right, he couldn't tell me who wrote I asked him who.
Like, you came to my door, buddy.
I said, who put together the New World Translation of the Bible as their translation? And I agree with James White when he says that is the most dangerous piece of anti-Christian propaganda that you'll find anywhere.
Right.
Because it's so subtle. But and if you know what you're looking for, it's not subtle at all, but it's subtle to the
average
reader.
Justification for why they won't publish the translators, it just screams.
We don't want to increase their arrogance, their pride.
No, you don't want us to find out how bogus, anti-scholarly they are.
But I asked this guy, I said, who wrote the New World Translation? Who edited or whatever? Who translated, yeah. And he said, well, they're great guys. I mean, they've got all the credentials. I'm like, can you tell me who they are? Well, no, I don't know, but I'm sure I can find out. So I said, well, you go and find out and come back. He came back a year later and he said, I can't tell you who. I don't know who wrote it. We're not supposed to tell.
That's by design.
No, we don't know. All right, so let's keep going.
Thousands of people have died from some of these beliefs for no reason. I know many people have died, and they shouldn't have. This was for no reason. But I'm glad that I'm out, because it's really scary.
I'm glad he's out
super
too.
Religious, and once I was out, it was like a relief on my shoulders, because part of me when I got this fellowship was like, oh shit, my life is ending. You lose your family, you lose your support system, everyone kicks you out, you're dead. It was nice to believe.
If you're an atheist and that's happened to you, I'm so sorry, because the truth is, if one of my kids became an atheist, I wouldn't stop loving them or kick them out of my house or anything like that. And to the extent that happens, well, and of course, the Jehovah's Witnesses, it's very tight. I mean, you're not supposed to read anti-JW stuff. You're not supposed to. I mean, and you can get disfellowshipped like this.
That we were scammed, and we were lied to, and we deserve better.
Yeah.
The world would be better off without religion. 3, 2, 1, go.
Is that agree or disagree?
Can I not? Go ahead. Try that out.
Okay. So everyone on the right agrees that the world would be better off without religion. Okay, and the Instagram poll is pretty close.
All anyone has to do is just research, just look, just read, just go out there and see the harms that religion not inherently does, but that it can and therefore does. Any major issue you can take in the U.S., and somehow religion will find a way to be behind that.
What about abortion? You know, we're right back to, it's not that religions are inherently bad, it's just they can be used to bring harm. Well, true, and where there's legitimate harm being done, then I'm with you. I'll combat that. But I think what you're calling harm in some cases is biblical truth.
And let's offset the entire world history, which scholars have looked into this, and they've looked at is religion ultimately behind all the wars, and they weren't Christian scholars, but they were just scholars, and they didn't find that to be totally compelling when there's so many other factors.
And look at the 20th century.
But even if we granted that, let's take the whole history of the world versus just the 20th century, and you still lose. So there's John Lennon's world, the 20th century, and the carnage and the violence and the bloodshed, and then religion. So,
but you're telling me there are some things that are done that I really don't like because of religion, and many of those things I'm sure I would agree with him on. Yeah. But some of the things that I think he would say that we're doing wrong or harmful or whatever, I feel the same way about atheists. 87% of them who are for abortion. And what I hear, and I think what I hear you saying and what you should hear me saying is I hear you saying, you don't understand. This stuff really matters. This is really important stuff because it impacts big stuff and all that. And I'm going, yes, right. I agree with you. This really matters. Now, can we get to the actual evidence?
Right. You know? Because any atheist that's not a complete moron will acknowledge that if you get rid of all religion, do you get rid of all evil in the world?
No.
Not even.
And we're going to find that out.
You just find a different scapegoat for it. You know? Or you're like a Christian and you're like, yeah, you have to own the 20th century. If we own our church history atrocities, you have to own that. No, we don't have to own that because they didn't do it in the name of atheism. Wrong. They did it in a religious, atheistic context, which shapes their worldview.
Why I'm standing here, despite being hurt by religion in the past, is that I feel like religion brings a lot of good to like the world in general. The pros outweigh the cons in my view. If there are people out there who
has been the largest force of good in the history of the world, without a doubt.
Without question.
Without a doubt. Evil, yes, but good, the good's so overwhelmingly dwarfs. And you don't like it that maybe it's tied to a religious message. So what? When you're non-religious charitable endeavors even can scratch the surface of what religious people are doing good around the world to benefit others, not just with a message, but with hospitals and food and clothing and shelter and all kinds of, then talk to me. But you're not even close. And if you go find any sort of non-theistic religions and lump them in with the atheist community, still not even close. Go find a non-Christian religion like Islam, still not even close.
What I like about this girl too is she strikes me as a normal atheist person.
Yeah.
Like not one who's like an activist.
Right.
You know.
Feel like they need an instruction manual to be a good person. I think they should have it.
The more I've thought about it, I've kind of looked at maybe large institutions, power structures, dogmatic beliefs are maybe more the real problem than the really broad, big, unwieldy definition of religion. The community I run is called Atheist United. Most people in my community would love to destroy religion in the world and think the world will suddenly be better, but I see a bunch of atheists then that are struggling with the same exact problems, that still have the same prejudices, deal with the same stereotypes, and we just changed the label.
I do agree that
What do you think about that?
Yep, I agree.
Community that's brought by religion, but wherever there's community, there is someone outside of that community. There are people not accepted into that community. There's ostracism. But I think in a world where there is either no religion or multitude of religions, there's always going to be like division in that multitude. And I just don't know if the ostracism and the pain is worth the hope that the community will override that.
Just to push back a little bit, given that...
I'm not sure what we're pushing back on. Is she saying, I think she's saying you're going to have divisions and stuff and all that, but why do we need the church? Why do we need religion in general to give that community?
Well, no matter what the community is, there's always going to be people on the outside, was one thing she said. But then she thinks that religion is divisive. So, but like, again, you want John Lennon's world, look at the 20th century atheist regimes.
We are tribal animals, right? We do get together. You know, if it's not going to be religions, which I'm fine with, then it's maybe your soccer team or your chess club or your sorority. And my biggest concern and why I work in this community is I don't know if you want to raise your children necessarily there, or if you feel like they share your values enough to help you if you're in the hospital, or you know, they're the people you can turn to if you're on your deathbed.
But just to push back a little bit too, I think that there is an issue if you think that the only group of solace that you can find for deep existential or physical problems is your religious group. If they're the only people that you can turn to for help, then that's a problem, because then you feel trapped inside of them. You can't escape that kind of group. And you touched on that a lot.
Absolutely.
Having different groups with different opinions instead of one group that has one fundamental idea and sense of morality. Because you need a group that can check that morality.
Yeah.
So the idea we have on the table here to talk about
what does that have to do with getting rid of religion if you just have a check on religion? Right,
that's true. But this is an interesting notion, right? So from an atheist perspective, the church does provide a lot of these communal outlets.
And that's a problem.
And that's a problem because if you're in it and those are your friends and those are the people around you, how are you ever going to escape? Well, first of all, I don't know too many people our age and younger who don't have friends that are outside of that bubble. And we certainly get it from the culture, right, outside of that bubble. So I actually think, you know, it's more almost the other way around, is the church actually gets you for an hour a week, right, or something like that. But if all your relationships are there, I can see it being difficult to leave. And I'm sorry that Christians are
but if you have a
job loving on people.
And if you have an atheist friend, your atheist friend will help you. You know, if you need money, if you need a place to lay your head at night, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But what there isn't just an overwhelming number of, you know, worldwide, and that's maybe, you know, that has to do with just the lack of numbers for this to pull together resources and all that. But if you're going to find a shelter, chances are it's going to be a religious one before you find the non-religious one, or the non-religious one's full, but there's 20 other shelters compared to the one that's, you know, secular funded and all that. And so, I mean, the amount of options to find help, you know, whether it's from your own community or just the broader religious community that you belong to. If I'm in any city, I'm going to find my people.
That's a thing, is that we have, like, let's say I'm trying to imagine a parallel. Let's say, not that this is what an atheist group would be like, but well, let's say I'm in a fraternity or something in college, not like necessarily a party fraternity, but it's a fraternity. And this is my closest group of confidants and stuff, or my friends in this fraternity. But let's say that they are all atheists, and I have, and I'm wanting to get a different perspective. In any city in America, I can find a church and I can go in there and talk to them. And why is this different than a chess club or whatever else was mentioned, these other communal activity groups? Is because the church, or really any religious religious of the main religions of the world, any group, congregation, ward, whatever, they're meeting here for the express purpose of talking about these big issues in life. And so it's all keyed up to talk about death and problems and tragedy and love and marriage and children and all those kind of things. A chess club isn't set up for that. Now, it is true that there's a mix of people there that all care about chess and they're real people. So maybe you can get comfort from them indirectly. But the church is powerful because it is the place communally where everything is set up to provide you answers to these biggest, most difficult questions. But a good church is going to let you talk about it and challenge things and that sort of deal. I don't know. I don't even know what we're doing anymore. Let's keep trucking.
I wish I believed in a higher power. 3, 2, 1, go.
I don't think it would make my life easier. I would have all the same questions I have and have worse answers.
You hear the rhetoric. I could pick him out. If he hadn't said he runs an atheist community or whatever, I think I could pick him out.
Yeah.
Because of the rhetoric.
I think it'd be very comforting to believe in a higher power, to believe that no matter what happens, you'll be okay.
Again, a really honest answer. Like, I like her because she's just like, wouldn't it be awesome? I think it'd be awesome, right? Like, that's the answer.
I think I'll be a much happier person, but I'm also very proud of what I have accomplished on my own. I know everything I have achieved is through my own effort.
Last year,
Okay, wait a minute. So there's a positive she mentioned about not having a higher power, is that the good things that she accomplishes, she doesn't have to share credit with God. She knows she did that.
Right. I can pat myself on the back as opposed to giving thanks to the gracious God that allowed me to accomplish this.
Mm-hmm. Which, fine, but you realize that that's not a good decision. That's not a good thing to, and I don't think she was putting it up as like a reason why she doesn't believe in God. It's more like, no, I wish there was a God, but okay, here's a pro.
Right.
I get to be proud of myself for things that I only did. Right.
Yeah. I mean,
but there are very few things you achieve in life that you only did, even if there were no God.
Right. But I mean,
there are things.
She's trying to say, if I can find a silver lining in it, it wasn't the grace of some other.
Fair enough.
But
look at you today, helping everybody out.
But again, on the one hand, I don't like the Christians that are so super pious that they can't. That if Braxton, if you ever came in and said, "Man, look what I got done today," and I said, "Not you. It was by the grace of God, Braxton. You're a seminary president." Okay, those Christians drive me nuts. Okay. Now, there's another end of the spectrum where it's all self-congratulatory, right? Mm-hmm. And those people drive me nuts. And there's Christians like that too that will never give thanks to God, or just give lip service to that idea, right? Mm-hmm. But as far as atheists go, I get what she's saying, but at the same time, she's right that she would be happier because, I mean, there's actually just psychology data on it. Of course you'll be happier. But it's so sad that her silver lining is an internal, I don't want to say selfish, but self-congratulatory. All I can do is pat myself on the back that I was able to do this in this meaningless world. There's a inherent sadness to that I would never, I don't know. I would find atheism unlivable. We talk about the livability test of a worldview, and atheism would just be unlivable.
Yeah.
And well, you see that in this normal person who's giving the most normal person answers to all of these questions, right?
She's not trying to form it around an agenda. Right. She's just telling you.
She's not trying to take a shot at Republicans who say thoughts and prayers and forgetting the other party. Right. But, she's just...
Or say, well, I'd have worse answers to everything. Yeah. Nothing like that. Just... You want me to be honest?
Yeah,
here's what I think.
It'd be great if guys. Yeah.
I used to be very close with, died of an opioid addiction, and it rattled my world because I'd never really been faced with the idea that like you always know you're gonna die one day and people die and it happens, but it was like this visceral reaction that we are so mortal and we are so powerless, and it really messed me up. And sometimes I still wake up at night and I have to drink a lot of water and relax. I'm so terrified of the idea of not existing anymore. It's not the idea of dying, it's just the idea of nothing.
There you go, Chris. That's for Chris Date. And for all those people that talk about eternal conscious torment, that's so much worse. These people aren't scared of, well.
If you have a view of hell as an atheist that, eternal conscious torment seems false on the face of it, and all this like Dante's Inferno type thing, which is not what eternal conscious torment people all think about that. But if you're one of those people who says, well, and if it's annihilation, I'm just going to not exist anymore. Well, that's not so bad. I mean, we've had people saying that, Dane Barker and others saying, well, where were you when how sad were you when the pyramids were being built? You didn't exist then. You won't exist after you're dead. That's not that big of a deal. But we do see that again with other people. That is a terrifying concept.
Right. That's why there exists a whole anti-natalism movement about it's preferable to have never existed than to exist and face your own inevitable death and extinction. So, there's a lot of atheists in the anti-natalism community. Am I saying that right?
I think so, yeah.
They don't think that you should have kids or procreate because there is this idea that, see, a lot of the atheist rhetoric, I think, is just chest thumping about the idea of non-existence as well as it'll be fine, right? And I think Chris has stumbled onto something, and I think...
mostly among 18 to 35-year-olds, many of whom death doesn't yet seem like a realistic concept.
Right.
She just said, I never really, I had this friend pass away or whatever, and whoa, I could die,
Right.
That's
and
because
complete non-existence after having this experience. And for some people, so traumatic, they think it's immoral to bring other people into
Yeah, and again, it's my understanding that your brain doesn't finish forming until you're 25 years old. And the last thing that forms has something to do with your ability to judge consequences, which is why when you watch a video from Fail Army, the people skateboarding off the roof of a barn onto swords or whatever are always 25 years old or younger. Where are the 30 and older people? They're the ones filming this whole ordeal. But it's because you're not thinking about it. I mean, when people going to the military at a young age, you remember we see footage from the past where these boys are like excited to go off to war and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know that was the norm. I don't know that it wasn't, but I can tell you this: you don't get that with a 40-year-old dude heading off to war.
Right. I mean, it's the same thing with people my age in the gym, right? You have no business lifting weights you can barely handle above your head without a spotter. What are you doing? Your shoulder could give out at any moment. I don't care how long you've been lifting. I'm not putting massive weight in an overhead press, standing under it.
So if you're a younger person, this is not a slight to you. I was aware of this when it was true of me.
You think you're indestructible.
Yeah.
But people my age and older don't have any business thinking you're indestructible. But some of them do too. I'm just saying.
Again, when we went to California, and I shared this on the other video, but I walked up some of these redwood trees that had fallen over. You can walk up to them and you're like 50 feet high, maybe something like, well, maybe not that much. Let's say 30 feet high, something like that. Because they're long, they're really long. And you keep walking. They're wide enough that it's like walking on a sidewalk. But when you get to the end, you're like, shoot, I am up here.
Yeah. And there's an edge right there.
And at 25, I'd have been like, yeah, okay, let's run back. Let's run down this thing. Me now, I'm like, I could like break something or could I die? I think I could die.
Yeah.
I would be upset if my children believed in God. 3, 2, 1.
Oh shit.
Am I going to be the intolerant one? Yes.
I can't be a hypocrite and say I would do the exact same thing I know religion and the religious have done to me and others, hearing all of you, and say, you're disowned. You're no longer welcome in my home. You are no longer a part of my life. I can't do that. And so, therefore, I'm going to change my answer to this.
Because this is an interesting question, because I think, given what we've heard from them already, I can get us, and the data will probably bear this out, any number of atheists, right? There's this idea that they're thinking, I don't want to say that I'm going to be upset, right? I strongly disagree that I would be upset because I don't want to look like I'm against being tolerant or whatever. That's the tolerance thing, I think, is what's driving the way that they're doing this.
Yeah.
But that's a worldview issue. Whereas you line up a bunch of Christians and ask that question, I would be upset if my children became atheists. overwhelmingly all the Christians would probably go to strongly agree.
Right.
Right. But not because they don't want, they're not thinking about the
not
tolerance
nominal
issue.
Christians.
Yeah.
Christians that are like serious about
No,
this.
nominal Christians too. Throw them in there. Throw in nominal Christians. I guarantee you they're going to be on the agree to strongly agree. And their thinking is not going to be, do I look intolerant? Their thinking is, I know the consequences of not believing in God. Their motivation for wanting their kids, for being upset if their kids disbelieve is my kid's going to go to hell or something, right? So you line up Christians, they go in the opposite direction, but they're going to go for a different reason than why I think. And like I said, I'm not reading their minds, but I've got the sense of they don't want to look like I'm just going to treat my kids like dirt if I say I'd be beside myself and upset and strongly agree that, yeah, I'll be devastated if they become Christian. Because they don't want to come off looking like that. And I think that's what's behind it. Not 100% sure.
Well, the point is we're not sure,
right.
But with Christians, we're very sure.
We know why the Christians
with Muslims,
right.
we're very sure.
Yeah.
Right.
They would go over to I would be very upset. I would be devastated.
Yes.
And their reason is they know the consequences.
Yeah.
Whereas what I think and like I said, I don't know for sure, but what I'm thinking is driving their ideas, they don't want to look like they would be insensitive towards their kids' beliefs. And so, or intolerant or whatever. So they're moving to I disagree with that. Right? I'd be okay. They can believe what they want because I'm open-minded, blah, blah, blah. That's what drives their thinking. But with religious people, Muslims, Christians, whatever, what drives their thinking is consequence.
And if you think that it's child abuse or whatever, to talk about that consequence, hell, right? Whatever you understand about hell. If you think that that's like, let's go back to my thing here. Is it traumatic, being taught about hell? Yes. Is it terrifying? Yes. Oh, well, then it's tyrannical. No, it's not necessarily tyrannical. It could be true.
Yeah.
So there's your T words.
It's like the cigarette smoker.
Yeah.
Is it traumatic to tell them, show them pictures of what
You're
their
dying
lungs
of
are going
cancer,
right.
sir.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
You're dealing with COPD. If you don't quit now, you're going to get cancer or whatever it is. Is that terrifying? Yes. Traumatic? Absolutely. Oh, well, it is tyrannical for that doctor to no, because he's telling the truth.
Yeah, and watching my dad go through it was a good thing because it got me to inevitably quit smoking because I watched my dad go through a death of lung cancer. It's not pretty, but somebody's got to tell you the truth about that kind of
right.
thing.
And you see now they're asking these people questions.
Yeah,
but you often see that these kinds of lines of arguments going off. What is it doing? It's distracting from the thing that we all say we're here for, which is to get to the truth. What's the truth? Not, do I like it? Not, is God a jerk? Not, I like the idea of something spiritual or whatever. It's what is true. That's what matters.
Indeed, sir. But yeah, I just think
relationship with God is very personal. So who am I to say who you should believe in or what you should believe in? As long as you're not hurting anybody or yourself, whatever's in your heart, just do it as long as you're not hurting anybody.
Again, for some reason, and I don't think she's just pulling wool over my eyes. I think she's being very sincere.
I do too, and for exactly the same kind of thing that I said is why she chose that view.
Would I be upset if my child believed in a God? A little bit. I'm not gonna lie. I'd be like, damn, I didn't do a good job. But
didn't do a good job. What? Indoctrinating them? Teaching them critical reasoning, critical thinking skills?
I agree with a lot of your guys' points. Like, as long as you're not hurting people, as long as you're like pursuing your happiness, be yourself, be happy, whatever that looks like.
I also think my problem with a religious person has never been their religion. It has been like things that they have used that religion to justify
Their interpretation of it.
Yeah, or actions or behaviors in name of their God. You know, so if my child chooses to believe in God and they don't use that to justify harm or malice, and that's fine.
Yeah, and one person I really look up to who is kind of Christ-like is Mr. Rogers. He's always been gentle and nice.
A Christian, a Presbyterian
minister. And he believes in God. Who am I to say, hey, Mr. Rogers, you need to stop?
Yeah, you guys all want to do lunch?
All right, so there you have it. That actually made for a fun discussion, I think.
Yeah, and other than Mr. Atheist Community Guy, I think that's the kind of thing. That's the kind of atheists on the street. And I think that they gave genuine answers, even though they took their talking points and except for the older lady. She was just straight a normal person, right? Just a normal everyday. The older lady. There was a maturity about you that
she was my favorite.
Yeah. I mean,
and the girl that came out of Mormonism, I liked her too.
I liked them all. I thought they were all nice.
They were all nice. But those two, like, I really felt I didn't feel any putting on anything with them.
Well, like, yeah, I mean well, they all seem like nice, decent folks. And other than Mr. Atheist Community Guy, typically the run-of-the-mill atheist who's not trying to spew nonsense on apologetic YouTube channel comment sections, right? Just normal people.
Yeah.
And I think there are more atheists like that than I do think are in the YouTube world trying to, because I have atheist friends in my Facebook, friends, whatever, post their feeds and stuff. They're not amped up on messaging all day long, and they probably don't watch the Atheist Experience on YouTube or care, right? So, I mean, it's like I know more atheists that are like these people than I do atheists that are on YouTube or in the comments. So normal atheists, those are the people that you could have a good conversation with, I think.
Go out and have real conversations with real people.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next time on Trinity Radio.